So friends, please settle down. We start this extremely important seminar, very timely, I suppose, given the kind of multiple challenges on multiple platforms that we are grappling with. This seminar on digital economy, e-commerce and the WTO. It is, in the title says WTO, but if you see the themes that are interlinked with this whole question of digitalization of the economy and the question of e-commerce, I think should not be viewed in isolation. These issues are beyond WTO, and they have imperatives far bigger, and the footprint is much larger in terms of how the wider global agenda is getting set. Those commentators who are saying that this is a new type of slavery which is going to come up in terms of how data monopolization is being done. Those who have described it as new oil, the actors like Amazon, Google, Apple and Facebook are the new colonizers, and number of those observations are all across. We have tried to bring in all different perspectives, and I'm extremely grateful to Mr. Rajeev Kher, who is heading our work program in this realm, has tried to bring in perspectives, and as you would see in your folder, this excellently articulated paper that brings out perspectives which are there. We are also extremely thankful to our own chairman, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, who actually was nudging us every time to do this at the earliest. And let me be frank that we had actually thought of doing it on 11th, and then we preponed to 5th. To see that given the urgency, and just yesterday India and South Africa have tabled their paper, and the hot author is with us here, who would be speaking to us in terms of how we are going forward. I'm also very, very grateful to Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey for sparing his valuable time and participating and joining us here. He is one of the key commentators across developing world to articulate this position. If India continues with this, probably it would be repeat of what we saw in case of agriculture. And that position is extremely important for us to understand how we go forward, as we are talking about the digital trade, which is 3 to 4 times larger than the services or the goods sector. UNCTAD has come up with statistics, and we are clear in terms of how Japan is pushing for it in the G20 platform, where they are talking about the digitalization as a major agenda item for the G20. The TPP also has come up in terms of how they would like to discourage data localization and would encourage sort of cross-border data electronically. That flow they would like to encourage. United States has been saying in terms of legitimizing the policy, public policy there. China has taken, interestingly, a very safe position in terms of reaping the low-hanging fruits by saying that they would go for a paperless trade or some other such priorities which are important. And EU-Japan position paper, if you see, they are talking about the trust, and trust as an element to move forward. To me, 5 areas I think are extremely important, and I'm keenly looking forward for the day as it would enlighten all of us. And unlike other RIS seminars, Mr. Rajeev Kher cautioned me to be very selective in terms of invitations. So we are this time extremely selective in terms of the invitation. So all those who are closely engaged in this theme are only invited, and we do not have a general group here for discussion. So the 5 themes that I feel are important. Number 1 is policies for further liberalization and facilitation. So what is it that that is on the table that we need to go for? The non-discrimination for digital content or customs duties on electronic transmissions, the moratorium that we are talking about and the paper that I referred to. Second point, I think, which is very important, is to policies to correct or mitigate market failures, and we are hearing about the IPR protection, consumer protection, and of course competition policy here assumes great significance. Point number 3 is about policies to reconcile values or social concerns with economic efficiency, and data and privacy protection, cyber security, other general exceptions that are there, I think are extremely important. Point number 4 is in terms of policies to accommodate data flows, data-related business in the domestic policy regime, which I think is important from the point of view of taxation, e-payment, fintech, other industrial regulations. And here infrastructure also becomes important if we are talking about data localization. What kind of infrastructure we have, or is it just the private sector, some of the dominating private firms that would just take up the government business? So that question, and then of course the whole another working group in RIS is trying to address the global governance of artificial intelligence, where we are trying to see issues that are related to ethics and other dimensions of it. With IIM Bangalore, we have undertaken a survey of Indian firms using artificial intelligence. What's the extent, and that's where the role of the Reserve Bank and many other entities that comes in sharp focus as to how we are moving forward on data localization. Fifth and last is of academic interest, but I think has huge policy imperatives as well in terms of industrial policy, strategic trade, and investment policies, how they are linked with these 4 points that I just mentioned. So with these words, I wanted to extend warm welcome to each one of you. I'm keenly looking for the day. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, who has very rich experience with multilateralism, both as India's ambassador there in Geneva, but also here in the headquarters, has dealt with some of these issues. I'm glad he agreed to chair this session. So, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin, for that comprehensive introduction. I'd like to thank each and every one of you, and also say that this meeting would have been meaningless without 2 people. One, the gentleman to my left. So thank you very much, Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey, for making it. Also, without Mr. Rajeev Kher, who I think, given his past responsibility, I thought there is nobody better qualified to run this session in terms of trying to find out where we stand. I want to emphasize one thing at the outset, and that is that this is not about deciding whether India should join the e-commerce negotiations or not. Let us not pretend that we are decision makers. We are not. Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey is. We will leave it therefore to him. I think for me, this session will have been meaningful if it helps me understand and others understand what is the contribution of the digital economy in India today to employment, to exports. And when I say employment, exports, I'm also talking about potential employment and potential exports, because these two are important, and this is what should be guiding our decision, not some ridiculously philosophical orientation of left, right, and center, frankly. So what is it that this sector contributes by way of employment and exports? And I would add a third element, which is important for me, somewhat controversially, I'm going to say not all important, but important in terms of technological self-sufficiency and expertise. It's important that I think we are able to match tomorrow's world, but I wouldn't pretend that we need to be at, let's say, first or second. That's fine. I would also begin by asking this meeting, how are we doing right now? Who owns Indian data now? That's an important question to answer. Who owns data now? How is it used by people who own it? And it's clear to me we don't own it. So if people are owning data now, and they've been owning it for 10 years now, so how are they using it? And that's important for me. I would also make another point, which is, hasn't the Indian ICT industry used free flow of data to kind of benefit enormously from it? We wouldn't have been an ICT superpower if there wasn't free flow of data. So today, if we are saying, and I'm saying hypothetically, that free flow of data is not so much in our interest, we need to be careful about exactly what we mean. If it is not in our interest, I'd like to know exactly in whose interest it is. Identify the interest. I'd like to know exactly who it is, who benefits from it. And finally, I look to some indications about some things I've never understood, but that's me. I'm sure there are people much more qualified than me in the audience. One is source code and where we stand, electronic signature and where we stand in India on this issue. And really, do we seriously believe that we can define electronic transmission without including physical products in it? Is this something that the Indian industry will be happy with? So these are some of the issues, and I'm not sure it's an exhaustive list, but I thought we should be clear at least about the mandate of this meeting. So philosophical, political discussions out. Nobody who belongs to any industry and is a responsible stakeholder shall keep his mouth shut. There is an old Geneva rule. If you come and have a free lunch, it's not a free lunch. You have to jolly well make some points and make meaningful points. Don't think the RIS has got unlimited funds to invite you and give you lunches. So please make your points. Since you represent a particular sector, make them as forcefully as you can. And I think the purpose of this meeting will be served if all shades of opinion are expressed. That was really at least our intention. Speaking for me, Sachin, and all the other colleagues in the RAS, we thought we will get all these shades of opinion and then attach weights to it in terms of employment, exports, and so on. I personally think, and this is not an original model, we did that in agriculture in the WTO, we did the same thing in services, we did the same thing in textiles. So it's not as if I'm suggesting anything revolutionary. It's just that, in my humble opinion, this has not yet been done in India. And I think what we are doing, therefore, is seeking policy space, which is wonderful, but policy space by itself cannot be the be-all and end-all unless you do something about it and unless you know what you're going to do with it. So that is really, I hope it's not been a meandering kind of thing, but I couldn't add much more to what Sachin has so eloquently said. So with those words, what I would suggest is, first we request the man in the hot seat, Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey, to say his piece. And then I'm really going to hand over everything to my illustrious colleague, Mr. Rajeev Kher, and he will run it as he deems fit. So, Mr. Sudhanshu Pandey, if I can request you to say a few words.
Okay, thank you. So, respected Ambassador Mohan Kumar, my former Commerce Secretary and a very illustrious civil servant, Shri Rajeev Kher, my distinguished colleague, Mr. Sachin Chaturvedi, and a lot of friends whom I know now for many years sitting here. It's a very interesting and a very timely session. But let me raise some issues which I think are extremely important, and we are still struggling to find answers as a country to many of those questions. The context here is WTO, but e-commerce is important from domestic perspective as well, because your international position would emerge only if domestically your policies, regulations are clear. Because if you bind yourself internationally without knowing what you are binding, then in future your policy space domestically becomes committed and you cannot do any rule making in that space. But do you have, now second important question, do you have the luxury of an eternal wait of not making that policy or those regulations which would shape the digital economy and the e-commerce? Do you have that luxury? My experience says that technology has never waited for anyone, neither the society nor the country. And if we don't catch up with the technology, we would be left behind. Now, this is a very important point. Third perspective, which I think is extremely important, and therefore we have to answer some of those difficult questions. There was a mention of Japan, and now Japan is in news because G20 summit is going to happen there. And if you recall that in 17, when the G20 happened in China, then Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, brought for the first time the digital economy in that G20 very forcefully. And today Japan is leading this cause. And you would also recall that about 5 years ago, Japan has brought out a comprehensive national paper called Society 5.0. This is the Japanese paper, and Society 5.0 is all about digital economy and how the Japanese society will be moving to digitization of all services, including health, agriculture, education, medical care, medical attendance, transport, public transport, everything. And when they brought out that paper, they started working on all the pillars which will support such a policy. So I recall about 4 years ago, even during the RCEP negotiations, the Japanese interlocutors will ask that we want IT engineers with specific knowledge, training, who have undertaken a specific curriculum which we have developed, because they wanted to make the Japanese Society 5.0 program successful. And therefore they wanted trained engineers to support that program. And they said we would be very happy to sign MRAs with Indian institutions, either at the state level or national level, or at the institution level. And if this course is taught the way we need people, then we would be very happy to take these people for the work that is getting created. And they said we have already signed one such institute, MOU with one such institute in South India near Chennai, and it has been a very successful experience. Now, why I am quoting this? As a country, as negotiators, you have to be confident and you have to be clear. Now, when this, I clearly saw an opportunity. Whatever you want to teach, we have whole lot of young people pursuing various courses. So if people who want to pursue a particular course which guarantees them a job, an exposure, there is no harm in picking up that opportunity. And I in fact, did discuss with AICTE that this is something which you should allow. Means those institutions who want to introduce that course and want to have tie-up with the Japanese professional institution, there should be no problem. Now I am citing this example, then we become cautious. We think, why this? Is there going to be then a commitment from my side? What that commitment would entail? Whether this will be good or not? Now, and this process of evaluation continues, and we have not yet been able to decide. This discussion goes on. So I'm sure Japanese have moved on to some other territories. They are hunting for talent somewhere else, and perhaps we would miss that opportunity. They are working on this program also in IIT Hyderabad, which is a very strong campus from Japanese perspective, where they have actually introduced language. They have opened Japanese canteen. All this is happening, and they are sourcing people from there. Now, why I am citing this example, this is exactly what dilemma we are passing through when it is coming to e-commerce. And what that dilemma is? The dilemma is, at least it doesn't exist in my mind. I am extremely clear that India cannot negotiate a good profitable deal unless it prepares itself to be in that league. But to be in that league, we all have to prepare ourselves. And when I am saying all, it is industry, the regulatory regime that has to come, that responsibility is on the government. There are a couple of areas which are completely new to us. In those areas, we have to still populate policies, programs. If you see the e-commerce readiness index, then India is at number 80. And our 80th rank, and we have come about to 80th in last about 3-4 years. We have improved from 83 to 81 to 80. So should we take 80 years to improve our ranking on the e-commerce readiness index and then only think of joining? Perhaps that can't be case with India. And what are the 4 elements on which that ranking is done? Unless we address those issues, then why we are not in that league? The very simple 4 issues. They talk of the payment systems. The payment systems have to be secure, easily accessible, affordable, internet, broadband penetration, safe servers, and reliable postal system in terms of locating the addresses. Otherwise, I don't know. It's okay because labor is cheap. So the courier delivery person, he keeps running from door to door, and maybe at times, in order to deliver one particular package, he will have to knock at 10 doors to finally discover which is the right door. And this is happening. And so this is a major challenge. So these 4 factors that determine the readiness, they are not difficult to address. They can be very easily addressed. The broadband program, which already exists. But in all the 4, we have to come up with a sense of urgency. And unless that urgency is there, we cannot. We have shown in ease of doing business, our ranking has improved from 140s to 77. So which means if we commit ourselves, if we want to do something, we can do it. So this particular aspect I leave it here. That these are the 4 areas where we have to work very diligently, and we have to show that we can be in that league from where we can confidently talk about our own interest, our own market. Third important point, I have gone through the agenda papers and the sessions. I am sure you will be discussing a whole lot of things. But still, there are today 14 papers on e-commerce. And we did some very interesting analysis. I didn't bring that paper today. And what that analysis is, I said if 14 papers covering whole range of countries, they are discussing a particular subject, let me see what are the elements, and on each of these elements, what is the position of different country. Because from that you can evaluate what is the interest that is driving a particular country in a particular direction. Because each country will not oppose or support every element. They will support or oppose a particular element depending upon their own interest. And exactly this is what, when we did the metrics preparation, we found, and from that a broader picture emerged. That I wanted to share with you. What is that broad picture? That broad picture is very interesting, and I leave answers to you during the course of discussion. That broad picture is, there is one set of countries which are technology driven, and they are looking aggressively for markets everywhere, because they are drivers of technology and they are wanting to move in the e-commerce space rapidly to take over markets. There is another extreme, and that extreme is group of those countries which are very small in terms of size, population, market, and for them, and they don't have the technology drivers, technology companies, so they fall precisely into the category of consumer countries, where this technology which is being driven by a set of countries will only be used. So for them, signing e-commerce agreement, not signing is irrelevant, because somebody will come, operate system for them, their retail market will move towards the digital market, they will set up all systems, they will set up everything, and they can't afford, they don't have the capacity, and therefore they are happy with that arrangement. Now there is third set of countries, and that is a very interesting. I wouldn't name, but you will realize that group of country, I wouldn't say countries, there are very few in that, who have the market, who have the technology. They want to use their own market for their own companies. They want to use their own companies for the others' market, but don't want other companies to operate in their own country. And therefore their elements are very different. On which element of that, whether it is data issue or the security issue or the payment issue or the server localization issue, their interests are very different. This fourth category of countries, where I can say we are fourth category of companies. We have the market, we have the capability, we have the opportunity, both inside as well as outside, but we are yet to wake up. So we don't have technology companies of the size who can set up good competition. We don't have companies who can launch their operations globally. Now, therefore, the fourth point that I was trying to make, for us e-commerce is a big opportunity. And this big opportunity will only become big if we start fixing those issues which are relevant. And I can go on to 9 specific areas where these issues have to be fixed. Some of you are aware who have gone through that exercise. And unless we fix all those concurrently, they have to be done. They cannot be linear fixation of those issues, because as I am saying, Ambassador Mohan Kumar very aptly said, 10, I would say, no, it's little more. It's almost now 2 decades when we unknowingly started moving into that direction. But by the time we knew that data is important, it was already out. And today, we don't have control over our own data. There is another very interesting paper which has come. I don't know if some of you have gone. I am sure Parbinder must have gone through, but I will still ask you to raise hands. There is a report which has been brought very recently in this month, May, previous month, by an organization which is based out of US. It's called Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. Has anybody gone through that report? Please go through that report. It's available on the net, and now it's doing rounds in Geneva also. And very, very good circulation is happening. And you know why it is circulating? That paper is trying to define for the first time data free flow with trust, DFFT, because DFFT has not been defined so far. The trust element remains undefined. But this foundation has come up with a paper which defines what does the data free flow with trust means. What is that trust element? What are the elements within that trust element? So I am very happy that at very right time, RIS has taken lead and has got all relevant stakeholders on this platform. Businesses are there, think tanks are there, associations are there, researchers are there. And therefore, onus is on all of us to ensure that this big opportunity that is knocking on our doors, we don't miss. If you read literature, I am sure you would have read much more than I would have. Only one thing, if you go through several papers internationally, one thing comes out very clearly, that those who are underestimating digital revolution will be the biggest losers, because this is mother of all revolutions. Digital revolution is going to be bigger than earlier 4 revolutions which started with the steam and the electricity. This is mother of all revolutions, because this is going to diminish borders, boundaries, everything, and countries, policies, everybody will be chasing this technology, and technology will be evasive. By the time we understand, something else would happen. And therefore, it's extremely important that we don't miss. We join this marathon in preparing ourselves. It's not a sprint which you can run and win. And for running this marathon successfully, you have to start. And I think it's time for us to start now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that sets the stage, so to speak, for this seminar. But without much ado, I'm going to really hand everything over now to my very distinguished colleague, Mr. Rajeev Kher. Rajeev, you have the floor and the mic and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan Kumar. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure trying to moderate this session. Let me at the outset confess that I am quite inadequate insofar as technology-related knowledge goes. So that's the reason why I've been asked to chair this session. So, I don't take too long in introducing the subject. But having said that, I think that the manner in which we have organized today's discussion is we have not really broken it into sessions, but we thought that if you have all the three presentations and then do the discussions, then one scores over the other and you don't get equal treatment to all of these important issues. So therefore, we have created some sort of fictional borders between two sessions, but actually I'm very conscious of the fact that all of these three issues have absolutely intimate linkages, and howsoever you may like to avoid in order to make it clean governance of the session, the fact is that they will spill into each other. So one presenter would make something which is relevant for the other, because ultimately they all are very closely interlinked. But having said that, let me try and keep it as orderly as we can. The first session is focused on the subject of moratorium on electronic transmission. Speakers have earlier alluded to India's cooperation with South Africa in moving a paper yesterday on the specific issue of moratorium on electronic transmission. Profusely, the paper relies upon the UNCTAD study, which Dr. Ashmi Banga is present here, is very closely, has been engaged with, and we have her as the first speaker for the session. The organization of this, all the three sessions, is that we have a lead speaker who essentially tries to unfold the specific issue in as many details as one can. And then we have tried to have two interveners, assuming that they come from different streams of thought processes. It's not necessary, it's my perception. Because I know that there is a huge amount of dichotomy or multichotomy of thoughts on many of these issues. And it depends upon which side are you coming from. Not side in the sense of a west or east, but side from whether you are coming from a purely technology oriented perspective, or you are coming from a policy oriented perspective, or you are coming from a development oriented perspective. So each will tend to look at all of these issues in different perspectives. And that is exactly the dilemma, the point which Sachin mentioned and Sudhanshu mentioned. The point which is facing us, which is staring at us, is actually why are we so slow with evolving a definitive action agenda on the subject. There is this huge dilemma or trilemma, whatever you call it, that we have not yet been able to find a common pathway where technology, policy, and developmental concerns can be brought together, and a pathway is unfolded for India for the next 20 years. And that is why this discourse becomes important as one small trickle in the overall effort. The second take I have is that we are not doing enough in terms of discussion on the subject. Very often, technology, largely driven by the Bangalore crowd, gets completely technology oriented. Policy, largely driven by Delhi crowd with an intermingling of international experts, tends to become very policy oriented or development oriented. But who is leading the common argument for India? And this is true not just for e-commerce or digital economy. This is true for all of the technologies which are being talked about, whether it is artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever you have, robotics or whatever else. There is no central mouthpiece for India's approach to digital economy, digital technology. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we have, how to come across that. Because as very rightly pointed out earlier, Time is running away from us. And if we do not catch up, I don't think technology development is going to wait for us. And we have actually the manufacturing revolution passed by us primarily because we did not catch up with a large part of public policy related engagement as well as technology related engagement. So therefore this becomes the bigger challenge. So I don't want to take more time. The lead speaker today is Dr. Rashmi Banga. Dr. Banga is an expert with UNCTAD. She has done very profuse work on issues relating to digital economy, particularly her study on the moratorium on electronic transmission. The issue involves